indestructible.
The Federation strictly forbids being gross. Don't wait.
Give me that back! You're not authorized to. You're jeopardizing the mission.
I'm in.
Nighty-night, 626.
Often the only.
Oh my god.
Other way.
Find the creature and remember. Why are you so strong?
Make them so quick!
Can you go any faster? Dangerous experiment. Soldiers, take them.
What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. Okay, so we need to talk about what just happened with Disney's live action Lilo and Stitch, because honestly I'm still processing this whole thing. This movie just crossed $1 billion at the worldwide box office. $1 billion. Let that sink in for a second. We are talking about a live action remake of a 2002 animated film that nobody thought would perform this well, and it just became the first $1 billion hit of 2025, blowing past every single expectation anyone had for it. Here's why this matters so much to me personally. Lilo and Stitch has been my comfort movie since I was a kid. I mean, I have probably watched the original animated film like 50 times, no exaggeration. So when Disney announced they were doing a live action remake, I had this weird mix of excitement and absolute terror. You know that feeling? Like, please don't ruin my childhood. But also, I really want to see Stitch in live action, and now that I have seen it, now that the world has seen it and responded the way they have, we need to break down every single aspect of this phenomena, because there's so much more going on here than just another Disney remake. Listen, I know what you are thinking. Another Disney live action remake deep dive. Really? But here's the thing, this one's different. This one actually matters in ways that most of these remakes don't. And I'm not just saying that because it made $1 billion. Though we will definitely talk about that business angel. I'm saying it because Lilo and Stitch 2025 represents something really interesting in the evolution of these adaptations. It's directed by Dean Fleischer Camp, the guy who made Marshall the Shell with Shoes On, which earned an Oscar nomination. This is not some hired gun director who doesn't care about the source material. This is someone who genuinely loves the original and brought a specific artistic vision to it. But beyond that, this movie sparked genuine debates, real conversations about what we want from remakes, about cultural representations in Hollywood, about whether certain characters work in live action, about the whole concept of ʻOhana and found family in the modern world. Some people absolutely adore his this film and think it's best Disney remake ever made. Others feel betrayed by specific creative choices and think Disney missed the entire point of the original. And you know what? Both groups have valid arguments, and we are going to explore all of them. By the end of this 2 hour deep dive, I promise you are going to see this movie completely differently. Whether you loved it, hated it, or have not even seen it yet, we are going to unpack every layer of what makes this adaptation work, what doesn't work, and why it became such a massive cultural movement. You will understand the filmmaking decisions, the controversies, the box office miracle, and most importantly, whether this movie honors the legacy of the original or if it's just another corporate cash grab. Alright, so here's what we are doing today. We are going deep, like ridiculously deep, into every single aspect of Lilo and Stitch 2025. We are talking cost analysis, character breakdowns, story deep dive, themes and meaning, filmmaking craft, box office phenomena, critical reception, production insights, controversies, and oh my god, are there controversies? Comparative analysis with the original, scene breakdowns, Easter eggs, and my complete personal verdict on this whole thing. Now, obviously, massive spoiler warning right here. We are about to dissect this entire film from beginning to end. If you have not seen it and want to go in fresh, bookmark this video, go watch the movie, then come back. I will be here, but if you have seen it, or if you don't care about spoilers, or if you just want to know everything before deciding whether to spend money on a ticket, then you are in exactly the right place. Before we dive in, do me a solid and hit that like button if you enjoy long form film analysis like this. Drop a comment with your thoughts on the movie, whether you loved it or hated it. I genuinely want to know, and subscribe if you want more deep dives into major releases because I have got so much planned for this channel. Alright, let's get into it. Lilo and Stitch 2025 hit theaters on May 23rd, 2025, which, if you remember, was Memorial Day weekend. This was actually a pretty strategic release date because Disney was banking on that long holiday weekend to give the film strong legs at the box office. The movie was produced by Walt Disney Pictures and right back with Jonathan, Eric, and Dan Lin producing. These guys have experience with Disney live action remakes. Rich produced Aladdin and Haunted Mansion, so he knew the playbook for this kind of adaptation. But here's where it gets interesting. This project was actually in development for years, like they announced they were making a live action Lilo and Stitch way back in October 2018. Originally, it was supposed to be a Disney Plus exclusive, not a theatrical release. Can you imagine? This billion-dollar movie was almost going straight to streaming, but somewhere along the line, after they saw the footage and realized what they had, Disney made the call to give it a theatrical release instead, and thank God they did, because this movie needed to be experienced in a theater with a big crowd. The directorial journey for this film is fascinating. Originally, John M. Chu was in talks to direct back in 2020. Now, John M. Chu went on to make Wicked, which we all know became its own massive phenomena, but he left Lilo and Stitch, and in July 2022, Disney announced Dean Fleischer Camp as a new director. Now, if you don't know Dean Fleischer Camp, you need to. This guy made Marshall the Shell with Shoes On. These incredibly touching stop-motion animated film about a teeny shell with shoes who's looking for his family. It's one of the most heartfelt, genuine piece of filmmaking I have ever seen, and it got nominated for Best Animated Feature at the Oscars. So Disney basically saw that and said, okay, this guy knows how to blend live action and animation. He knows how to create emotional depth with weird characters. He's perfect for Lilo and Stitch. The pre-release hype for this movie was fascinating to watch. When they first revealed what live-action Stitch would look like, the internet absolutely lost its mind. People were posting comparison images, making memes, arguing about whether he was too realistic or not realistic enough. There were genuine debates about the uncanny valley effect with CGI Stitch. Some people thought he looked adorable, others thought he looked kind of terrifying. The trailers got millions and millions of views, which showed there was definitely audience interest, but nobody, and I mean nobody, predicted this movie would make $1 billion. The tracking numbers before release suggested a solid opening, maybe a decent run, but nothing that would break records. Personally, going into this movie, I was cautiously optimistic. I loved the original so much that I was terrified they would mess it up, but the fact that Dean Fleischer Camp was directing gave me hope. I remember sitting in the theater on opening night, looking around at all these families and adults who grew up with the original, all of us just hoping this wouldn't be a disaster, and then the lights dimmed, and we are about to find out if Disney had actually done the impossible and made a remake that worked. Let me tell you something about casting this movie. Finding a young Hawaiian girl who could carry an entire Disney blockbuster on her shoulders while staying true to the cultural authenticity of the character. That's an enormous challenge, but Disney somehow found Maia Kealoha, and honestly, she might be best casting choice they have made in any of these live action remakes period. Mia was born December 15, 2016 in Kailua Kona on the big island of Hawaii. She is a native Hawaiian girl who's been dancing hula since she was tiny, started dancing Tahitian at the age 2. This was not some random kid they found at an open casting call in Los Angeles. This was a girl who lives and breathes Hawaiian culture. She won the title of Mini Miss Kona Coffee in 2022. And get this, she auditioned for Lilo when she was 5 years old. 5. They cast her in 2023 and Lilo and Stitch became her very first on-screen role, her feature film debut. Can you imagine the pressure? Your first ever acting job is playing one of the most beloved characters in Disney's animated canon in a movie that needs to make hundreds of millions of dollars to justify its existence. What makes Mia's casting so perfect is that she embodies everything Lilo is supposed to be. The original Lilo was this wonderfully weird little Hawaiian girl with her own unique perspective on the world, someone who didn't fit in with the other kids who had this deep connection to Hawaiian culture and Elvis Presley and taking photos of tourists. Mia brings all of that authenticity because she's that. She understands the cultural context in a way that no man-led kid ever could. When she was dance hula in the film, that's real. That's her actual skill set, not something she learned for the role. Sydney Elizabeth Agudong playing Nani is another stroke of genius casting. Sydney is also of Filipino and Hawaiian descent, so again, you are getting authentic cultural representation. But what's really interesting about Sydney is that she was apparently a huge fan of the original film growing up. She has talked in interviews about how she approached Nani is as completely new interpretation while respecting what came before. And in this variant, Nani gets way more depth than she had in the animated film. We'll talk about that more when we get into character analysis, but Sydney had to carry so much of the emotional weight of this movie. She's playing someone who's basically still a teenager has herself, but has to be a parent to her little sister after losing both their parents. That's heavy stuff, and Sydney handles it with real maturity and nonsense. Now let's talk about Chris Sanders coming back to voice Stitch. This was non-negotiable for fans. Chris Sanders co-wrote and co-directed the original animated film, and he created Stitch's voice, that bizarre mix of gibberish and broken English that somehow became iconic. When Disney confirmed he was reprising the role, that was huge relief to everyone. According to interviews, Chris did 5 voice recording sessions late into production, and each session lasted about 4 hours. He explained that the Stitch voice is incredibly difficult to maintain for long periods because it's so physical and taxing on his vocal cords, but he committed to it because he loves these characters as much as we do. The sporting cost is where things get interesting and slightly controversial. Zach Galifianakis as Dr. Jumba Jacobia is, let's be honest, kind of weird choice. Zach is funny, he's got that comedy energy, but he right for Jumba, that's debatable. In the original, David Ogden Stiers voiced Jumba with his over-the-top Russian-ish accent that was absolutely hilarious, but also slightly problematic by today's standard. Zach brings something different, a more grounded approach, but I'm not sure it totally works. We will dig into this more, but a lot of people felt like he was miscast. Billy Magnuson voices Agent Blakely, and again this is a departure from the original where Kevin McDonald gave Blakely this high-strung, neurotic energy. Billy is doing his own thing and it's fine, but it doesn't quite capture what made Blakely so memorable in the animated version. Courtney B. once playing Cobra Bubbles should have been perfect. Courtney B. once is an incredible actor with this natural gravitas and authority. In the original, Wing Rams voiced Cobra with that deep, intimidating presence. But here's where one of the movie's big controversies come in. They changed Cobra's role significantly in this remake, making him less intimidating and more of a typical social worker. Some people felt like this nurtured the character and removed a lot of what made him interesting. Courtney does his best with what he's given, but the character just is not the same. Hannah Waddingham voices the grand councilwoman, taking over from Zoe Caldwell in original. Hannah is great. She brings that regal quality the character needs. No complaints there. And then there are some really nice touches with the supporting cast. Tia Carrere, who voiced Nani in the original animated film, appears in a new role as Mrs. Keiko, a social worker. That's such a lovely bit of continuity, bringing back someone from the original in a new capacity. It shows respect for the legacy while moving forward. Amy Hill, who also worked on the original film's franchise, appears in a new role as well. Overall, the casting shows Disney was trying to thread this needle of cultural authenticity, respecting the original, and creating something that works for 2025. Did they succeed with every choice? Not entirely, but the lead casting of Maya and Sydney was absolutely spot on, and that's what matters most because they are the emotional center of everything. Let me break down Lilu Paleke as she exists in this 2025 version because there are some key differences from the animated character, and understanding those differences is crucial to understanding what this movie is trying to do. In this version, Lilu is still that beautifully weird, quirky 6-year-old who doesn't quite fit in with the other kids. She is obsessed with taking photos of terrorists. She loves Elvis. She practices hula. She believes in the strange and unusual. Maia Kealoha captures all of that perfectly. But what this version adds is a deeper layer of grief and loneliness that feels more grounded in reality. The animated Lulu was grieving her parents, absolutely, but it was portrayed in that stylized Disney way. This live action Lilu, you can see the weight of that loss in her eyes. Mia plays it with this vulnerability that absolutely breaks your heart. What drives this character? At her core, Lilu is desperately lonely and searching for connection. She is not just a weird kid who cannot make friends. She is a traumatized child who lost her parents and is acting out because she doesn't know how else to process that pain. When she feeds Pudge the fish because Pudge controls the weather and she thinks the weather killed her parents, that's not just a cute quirky thing, that's a child trying to maintain a control in a world that feels completely chaotic and unsafe. Mia plays those scenes with just the right amount of sincerity. You believe that Lilu genuinely thinks she can prevent more tragedy by keeping Pudge happy. The character arc for Liu in this variant is about learning that family doesn't have to be perfect to be real. She starts the movie pushing everyone away, including Nanny, because she's so hurt and so scared of losing anyone else. Then Stitch comes into her life, and Stitch is even more broken than she is. There's this beautiful parallel where Lilu is trying to fix Stitch, teaching him about ʻOhana and family, but really they're fixing each other. By the end of the film, Lilu has learned that it's okay to be broken, it's okay to be weird, and it's okay to let the people love you even when you don't feel lovable. Mia's best moments in this film are the quiet ones. There's a scene where Lilo is sitting alone after getting in trouble at school, and you can just see all this pain and confusion on her face. She's 6 years old but carrying the weight of the world. Another standout moment is when she's teaching Stitch about ʻOhana, explaining that family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten. Mia delivers that line with such earnestness that you forget you're watching a kid actor. She becomes Lilu. Are there weak moments? Honestly, very few with Mia's performance. If anything, the weakest scenes are when the script forces her into overly cutesy territory. There are a couple moments where you can tell Disney wanted her to adorable and marketable rather than authentic, and those moments feel slightly off. But that's not Mia's fault. That's the studio trying to make sure kids want Lilu merchandise. What makes this character compelling in 2025 is how relatable she is to a generation of kids dealing with real trauma. In 2002, the original Lilu resonated with kids who felt like outsiders. In 2025, this version resonates with kids who are dealing with loss, with mental health struggles, with feelings like their family is falling apart. The character has evolved to meet the moment, and that's actually pretty smart writing. Now, comparing this Lulu to other protagonists in Disney live action remakes, she is probably the most successfully adapted. The kid playing Christopher Robin in that movie was fine but forgettable. The various princes in other remakes have been hit or miss, but Mia's Lulu feels like a real child with real emotions, not just a CGI princess given human form. Personally, I connected with this version of Lulu even more than the animated one, and I didn't think that was possible. Maybe it's because I am older now and I understand grief better, or maybe it's because Mia just brings something incredibly authentic to the role. Either way, this Lulu works. She's at the heart of the movie, and every scene she's in, you believe what's happening. Okay, this is where we need to talk about one of the most controversial decisions in the entire movie. In the original animated Lilo and Stitch, the main antagonist is Captain Gantu, this huge shark-like alien who works for the Galactic Federation and will stop at nothing to capture Stitch. He is intimidating, he is ruthless, and he creates genuine tension. In this 2025 version, Gantu doesn't exist. He was completely cut from the film. Let me tell you why this is such a massive deal. Gantu was not just some random villain. He was integral to the entire structure of the original film, and he became a major character in the broader Lilo and Stitch franchise. He appeared in Stitch, the movie. He was the primary antagonist in Lilo and Stitch, the series. He showed up in Leroy and Stitch, where he finally got his redemption arc. Cutting him doesn't just affect this one movie, it potentially affects any future sequels or spin-off. So why did director Dean Fleischer Camp cut Gantu? Well, he's been pretty open about it in interviews. He said that Gantu just didn't work well in live action, that bringing a giant whale shark alien to life would have been incredibly expensive and difficult from a VFX standpoint, and that it would have pulled focus from the more grounded emotional story he wanted to tell about the sisters. He also said that needed to free up real estate in the script to give more breathing room to explore the themes and the relationship between Lilu and Nanny. I get that logic. I do. From a purely practical filmmaking standpoint, adding Gantu would have required extensive VFX, probably tens of millions of additional dollars in the budget, and another major character to juggle in an already packed story. But here's my problem with that reasoning. You are making a movie about an alien genetic experiment that looks like a blue cola and can lift 3,000 times his own weight. You already have CGI aliens all over this movie. Play looks bizarre in this variant, kind of uncanny actually. If you're going to have Plakley looking weird, why draw the line at Gantu? But the bigger issue is what they did to replace Gantu as the antagonist. In this variant, Dr. Jumba Jukubya becomes the primary villain and he stays villainous throughout the whole film. In the original, Jumba starts as kind of bumbling antagonist but quickly goes through a redemption arc and becomes part of the ʻOhana. That redemption is crucial to the theme of the movie. Nobody gets left behind or forgotten, including the owl's genius who created Stitch. By the end of the original film, Jumba is family. He is part of household. It helped Lilo and Stitch in all sequels and the series. In this 2025 variant, Jumba remains a straight-up villain. He wants to capture Stitch not to save him or redeem him but to do more experiments to weaponize him further. At the climax of this movie, Jumba tries to kidnap Stitch. There's big action sequence and then Jumba gets arrested and taken away. No redemption, no joining the family. He just gets hold of in alien handcuffs and that's the end of this story. Now Zach Galifianakis does what he can with this version of Jumba. He brings his trademark occult comedy to the role. There are some funny moments, but it doesn't feel like Jumba. It feels like Zach Galifianakis doing a Zach Galifianakis character in a Lilo Stitch movie. And more importantly, making Jumba a pure villain fundamentally undermines one of the core themes of the original film. The original Lilo and Stitch is about how even the most broken, destructive, unwanted beings can find family and redemption. Stitch finds it with Lilo and Nani, but Jumba also finds it. Plakley finds it. They all become part of this weird, unconventional family unit. That's the whole point of ʻOhana in this variant. By keeping Jumba as a villain and arresting him at the end, movie is literally saying some people don't deserve redemption, some people to get left behind. That's the opposite of the original message. Is Jumba effective as a villain in this variant? Yeah, kind of. He's not particularly threatening. There's no sense of real danger when he's on screen. That plays him too goofy and comedic to be scary. So you don't have the tension that Gentoo brought, but you also don't have the heartwarming redemption that original Jumba brought. You are stuck in this weird middle ground where Jumba is just kind of there, being vaguely antagonist until he's not there anymore. Comparing this to other films' antagonists, Jumba as villain ranks pretty low. He is not compelling, he is not particularly threatening, and his motivations are paper thin. The original Gentoo was compelling because he was not even really a villain in the traditional sense. He was doing his job. He was a loyal soldier following orders to capture a dangerous weapon. You could understand his perspective even as you rooted against him. This variant of Jumba is just a mad scientist who wants to do mad science. That's it. That's the entire character. My honest opinion, cutting Gentoo was a mistake and making Jumba the villain was an ever bigger mistake. I understand the budgetary and narrative concerns, but the solution created more problems than it solved. If they really could not afford or didn't want to do Gentoo, they should have come up with a different antagonist entirely, not corrupted, an existing character who's supposed to represent redemption. Let's talk about Nanny Plakai first because honestly, in this variant, Nanny is almost more the protagonist than Lulu is. Sydney Elizabeth Agudong is carrying massive emotional weight in this role and she absolutely delivers. In the original animated film, Nanny was a great character, but she was somewhat one-dimensional. She was a struggling older sister trying to keep the family together, and that was her primary function in the story. This 2025 variant gives Nanny so much more depth and complexity. Here's Nanny is a straight A student who had dreams of going to college, specifically studying marine biology. She had a whole future planned out. Then their parents died, and suddenly she is a teenager responsible for raising a 6 years old. Not only does she have to abandon her dreams, but she is effectively failing at one job she has left, which is keeping Lilo safe and out of foster. Sydney plays this with incredible nuance. You can see the resentment Nanny sometimes feels toward Lilo, even though she loves her sister desperately. You can see the exhaustion, the fear, the feeling of being completely overwhelmed and in over her head. There are scenes where Nanny is literally shaking because she's so stressed out, and Sydney makes you feel every bit of that. When Nanny breaks down when she's told that social services might take Lilu away, Sydney's performance in that moment is absolutely devastating. This is not a Disney Channel level performance, this is real acting. What I love about what that did with Nani in this version is they made her arc just as important as Lizzie's. Nani starts the movie trying to be perfect, trying to do everything right, but she is drowning. Through the course of the film, she learns that it's okay to ask for help, it's okay to not have all the answers, and it's okay to pursue your own dreams while still being there for your family. The mid credit scene, which we will talk about more later, shows Nanny attending UC San Diego to study marine biology while still being connecting to Lilo through Jumpa's portal technology. That's beautiful resolution that honors both Nanny's need to grow as a person and her commitment to her sister. Sydney's chemistry with Maya is incredibly believable. You genuinely buy that these two are sisters who love each other but are also driving each other crazy. The arguments feel real, the tender moments feel earned, and that's crucial because if you don't believe in their relationship, the entire movie falls apart. Now, let's talk about Agent Blackley, voiced by Billy Magnuson. In the original, Kevin McDonald voiced Blackley as this neurotic, high-strung, one-eyed alien who was terrified of Earth and kept trying to protect the mosquito population. He was hilarious. Billy's version is different. He's going for more of a straight man comedy approach, playing Blackley as more competent and less panicky. It's fine, it gets some laughs, but it's not as memorable as the original interpretation. Billy is clearly talented, but the script doesn't give him as much to do, and the character suffers for it. Courtney B, once as a Cobra Bubbles, is a weird case because the character has been significantly altered from the original. In the 2002 film, Cobra Bubbles was this intimidating former CIA agent who had this mysterious past and treated his job with deadly seriousness. Wing Rams playing him with his deep, rumbling voice that made every line sound important. Cobra was scary, but ultimately on Lilu and Nanny's side. In this variant, Cobra is just kind of regular social worker. He's sympathetic, sure, but he doesn't have that edge that made the original character so interesting. Courtney does his best and he brings warmth to the role, but I miss the intimidation factor. I miss the sense that this guy had seen some serious stuff and could handle himself in any situation. This Cobra feels like he would be stressed out by a parent-teacher conference, whereas original Cobra felt like he would previously negotiated with the alien warlords. It's a significant downgrade to the character. David Kawina is played by Kehe Mekode and he's fine. David doesn't get a ton to do in this variant either. He's Nani's love interest. He's sportive, he serves, he tries to help out. Kehe brings a nice, gentle energy to the role and he feels authentically Hawaiian, which matters. But the character is pretty underwritten. He exists mostly to show that Nanny has someone in her corner, but he doesn't have much of personality beyond being nice. The new addition of Mrs. Kako, played by Tia Carrere, is actually really sweet. Tia voiced Nanny in the original, so having her play a sportive social worker who helps the family is a nice bit of franchise continuity. She doesn't have a huge role, but every scene she's in, you can feel the genuine care she has for these characters and this story. Overall, the supporting cast does solid work with what they are given. The problem is that some of these characters have been diminished from their original versions. Pluckley and Cobra Bubbles especially feel like shadows of what they once were. But Sydney as Nanny is a massive upgrade, giving that character depth and complexity that elevates the entire film. Here's the thing about ensemble dynamics in this movie. The human characters have great chemistry together. Maya and Sydney feel like real sisters. The scene with them and the various supporting characters around them feel grounded and authentic. When Lilu is interacting with her classmates, or when Nanny is dealing with social workers or talking to David, all of that feels real. Where the ensemble dynamics get weird is with the aliens. Stitch is CGI, obviously, and they did a really small thing during production where they use an incredibly detailed puppet on set for the actors to interact with. There's behind the scenes footage of little Mia meeting the Stitch puppet for the first time, and she immediately kisses him on the nose. That's a kind of genuine connection that translates to screen. When you watch Mia with Stitch in the final film, she's not just acting with the tennis ball on a stick. She built a real relationship with that puppet and then CGI team enhanced it. But Jumba and Plekle, in their alien forms, they are also CGI and they fall into that uncanny valley territory that a lot of people complained about. It's harder for the actors to build chemistry with characters that don't physically exist on set, and you can feel that disconnect sometimes. When Jumba is threatening Lilo and Stitch in the climax, there's a remove to it because Mia and Stitch are reacting to nothing. The on-set dynamic seems to have been really positive based on interviews. Dean Fleischer Camp clearly created an environment where everyone felt supported, especially Mia since this was her first film. Sydney has talked about how she took Mia under her wing and helped her navigate the whole movie making process. Chris Sanders has spoken about how much he enjoyed returning to Stitch and how collaborative the voice recording sessions were. One thing this movie does really well is capture the sense of community in Hawaiian culture. The supporting characters, the neighbors, the people in Lilu and Nani's lives, they all feel like they are genuinely part of this world. There's something the original animated film did beautifully, and this variant maintains it. You get the sense that ʻOhana extends beyond just blood family to the entire community around them. Comparing this ensemble to the other great Disney casts, it's solid but not exceptional. The Mia Sydney dynamic is up there with the best sibling relationships Disney has put on screen, but the ensemble as a whole doesn't quite gel the way the original animated cast did, partly because of the live action constraints and partly because of the changes they made to characters like Jumba and Cobra. One interesting thing Dean Fleischer Camp talked about in interviews is how he approached directing child actors versus adult actors versus voice actors. He said with Mia, his main goal was making sure she felt safe and supported so her natural personality could come through. With the voice actors like Chris Sanders, it was about maintaining that balance between the familiar voice everyone loves and making it feel fresh for 2025. And with the live action adults, it was about grounding their performances in emotional reality rather than broad comedy. The end result is an ensemble that works mostly. The pieces that are supposed to be heart of the movie, Lilo and Navani, primarily absolutely work. Pieces that are supposed to provide comedy and adventure, Stitch and to some extent Pluckley, work pretty well. The pieces that are supposed to provide conflict and stakes, that's where it gets shakier because Jumba as villain just is not as effective as he should be. Alright, let's walk through this story from beginning to end and really analyze what's happening both on the surface and underneath. The movie opens with the Galactic Federation scene, which mirrors the original. We see the trial of Experiment 626 Aka Stitch, the Grand Council woman, voiced by Hannah Waddingham, is sentencing him to exile. Chris Sanders doing the Stitch voice immediately made me smile in the theater because it's so distinctly him. That weird gibberish language that somehow conveys personality, it's iconic. But here's where this version does something smart. The trial scene in the original was pretty quick, mostly just set up to get Stitch to Earth. This version lingers a bit more on the idea that Stitch was created to be a weapon, that he literally cannot help being destructive because that's his programming. This become important later because the movie is really about nature versus nurture, about whether we are defined by how we are made or by the choices we make and the people who love us. Stitch escapes, steals the ship, and crash lands. A cave now on the original film had this beautiful watercolor aesthetic that made Hawaii look like this idealized paradise. This live action version actually shoots on location in Hawaii and it's gorgeous. The cinematography captures the real beauty of the islands and that matters for cultural authenticity. This is not a soundstage pretending to be Hawaii. This is actually Hawaii with real location that local viewers recognize. Then we cut to Lilu's introduction, and this is where Maia Kealoha immediately makes the character her own. We see Lilu taking photos of tourists, feeding Pudge the fish, practicing hula. But what's different from the animated version is what you can see on this kid. Animated Lilu was quirky and weird. This Lilu is quirky and weird, but there's sadness underneath everything she does. You can tell she is trying to maintain control in a world that feels chaotic. The scene where Lilu gets in trouble at her hula class is pretty similar to the original, but there's added context about why she acts out. In the animated film, Lilu punched a girl for saying something mean. In this variant, we understand more clearly that Lilu is being built, that these other kids see her as the weird girl, and that she is responding out of hurt and isolation. It's more nuanced portrayal of childhood bullying and trauma response. Nanny shows up to the pickup Lilu and we immediately see the intention between them. Sydney plays this with such frustration and love all mixed together. She loves Lilu so much, but she is at her wits' end. She doesn't know what to do, and Lilu can feel that, which makes her act out more because she is scared that Nanny is going to give up on her like everyone else has. The introduction of Cobra Bubbles is where you really feel the difference from the original. Original Cobra was intimidating from his first scene. This Cobra is more sympathetic, more understanding. He is trying to help, but he is also clear that if things don't improve, he will have to remove Lilu from the home. Courtney B. Vance plays it with compassion, which is fine, but I missed the edge that Wing Rams brought. Now we get to the pound scene, which is one of my favorite sequences in both variants. Lilu is looking for a dog because Nanny thinks maybe having a pet will help Lilu feels less alone, and then Lilu sees Stitch in the cage pretending to be a dog. In the original, this scene was played for maximum cuteness. Stitch deliberately made himself look as pathetic and adorable as possible to manipulate Lilu into adopting him. This variant keeps that energy, but there's something a bit different in how Maya and CGI Stitch interact. She sees him and immediately connects with him because he is weird one, the one nobody else wants. She is drawn to him because she recognizes herself in him. The adoption worker in this variant, a small role, tries to steer Lilu toward more conventional dogs, which adds a nice beat about how people often overlook the weird kids, the different ones, in favor of what seems safe and normal. But Lilu insists on Stitch, and Nanny, desperately trying to make Lilu happy, agrees to it. Taking Stitch home and naming him, that whole sequence is deeply faithful to the original Stitch because he's all stitched up. She thinks we get that this is my family speech, which is one of the iconic moments from the original film, and Maya delivers it beautifully. But in this variant, when she is showing Stitch the photo album and talking about how her family is little now and broken but still good, you can hear the pain in her voice. This is not just a kid explaining things to a dog. This is a traumatized child trying to convince herself that everything will be okay. Meanwhile, up in space, Jumba and Plekle are being sent to Earth to retrieve Experiment 626. In the original, this was all set up for comedy. Jumba was bumbling, Plekle was neurotic, and their dynamic was hilarious. In this variant, Jumba is more competent and sinister, which changes the tone. Plekle is still somewhat comedic, but the emphasis is different. The first act does a good job of establishing the core conflict. Lilu is broken, Nanny is failing to help her. Stitch is a destructive weapon, pretending to be a dog, and government forces, both alien and human, are circling the family. The stakes are clear. If Nani cannot get things under control, she loses Lilu. If Jumba captures Stitch, Lilu loses the one thing that's starting to make her feel less alone. What I appreciate about the setup is how it takes time to build the emotional foundation. This is not just a rushing to get to the action, it's establishing why we should care about these characters, what they are fighting for, what they stand to lose. By the end of Act 1, you are completely invested in his family. Here's what I love about this opening, it establishes themes immediately. We are seeing ideas about belonging, about family, about what makes someone worthy of love. We are seeing symbolism in how Lilu photographs tourists trying to capture happy families and moments she doesn't have. We are seeing foreshadowing in how Stitch is designed to destroy but is learning to pretend to be elsewhere. The pacing in Act 1 is pretty solid. It moves efficiently without feeling rushed. Some Disney remakes spent way too long on setup, trying to cram in backstory and world building. This one trusts the audience to understand the basics and moves forward. The runtime is 108 minutes compared to the original 85 minutes, so they had room to breathe, but they don't waste it. Comparing this opening to other Disney remakes, it's better than most. The Lion King remake basically just recreated the original shot for shot with realistic elements, which was soulless. The Aladdin remake changed too much and lost what made the original special. This version of Lilo and Stitch finds a middle ground. It keeps what worked, enhances the emotional depth, and makes smart choices about what to update for modern audience. Okay, so Act 2 is where things get interesting and where the movie really starts to diverge from the original in significant ways. The structure is similar. We are following Lilo trying to train Stitch to be good while Stitch keeps destroying things and causing chores, but the emotional undercurrent is different. The montage of Lilo trying to civilize Stitch using Alvis and various activities is mostly faithful to the original, and it's just as charming. Watching Mia interact with CGI Stitch while Elvis music plays is pure joy. They have got Hound Dog, they have very got Heartbreak Hotel, and there's a new cover of Burning Love produced by Bruno Mars and performed by his nephews. The Elvis connection is so fundamental to Lilo and Stitch's identity that they could not have cut it, and thankfully they enhanced it with some modern production while keeping the retro feel. But here's where things starts to shift. In the original Stitch, destructiveness was played primarily for comedy. He would track stuff, cause chores, and there would be funny consequences. In this variant, there's real stakes to his behavior. When Stitch causes a scene at a restaurant or tears up the house, you see how it affects Nanny's mental state. Sydney plays these scenes with this mounting desperation every time Stitch causes a problem. That's another strike against Nanny in Cobra Bubble's evaluation. She can't afford any more mistakes, and Stitch is basically a mistake generator. This creates a really interesting dynamic where Lilo is bonding with Stitch, starting to love him, but Nanny sees Stitch as this threat to their family staying together. There's a scene where Nanny and Lilo have a big argument about Stitch, and it's heartbreaking. Lilo is screaming that Stitch is part of the family now, and Nanny is trying to explain that they might not have a family at all if they can't get things under control. Both of them are right, and both of them are hurting. Meanwhile, Jumba and Pluckley are actively hunting Stitch, and their methods keep escalating. In the original, their attempts to capture Stitch were slapstick and funny. They would set traps, Stitch would outsmart them, and it was all very loony tunes and in its energy. This version keeps some of that, but Jumba is presenting as more of the genuine threat. When he confronts Stitch, there's actual danger in those scenes. One subplot that's explained in this version is David's Karina's relationship with Nanny. In the original, David was clearly interested in Nanny and she liked him back, but her responsibilities to Lilu made the relationship complicated. This version gives more screen time to that dynamic, showing how Nanny is sacrificing her own happiness and her own chance at romance because she was to be everything for Lilu. Davis is patient and understanding, but you can see it wearing on both of them. There is also more focus on community around Lilu and Nanny. The neighbors, the shopkeepers, the people who have known them their whole lives. This matters because it reinforces the theme that ʻOhana is bigger than just blood relatives. These peoples are not family by genetics, but they are trying to help. They are part of support systems, even if it is not enough to solve all the problems. The beat where Stitch starts to learn about ʻOhana, where Lilo explains what family means, is the emotional core of the second act. In the original, this happened pretty quickly. Lilo gave her speech about nobody gets left behind or forgotten, and Stitch started to change. In this variant, it's a process. Stitch doesn't immediately understand. He's literally programmed to destroy, so fighting that programming is hard, but gradually, through Lilo's patience and love, he starts to change. There's a scene in this variant that absolutely destroyed me. Lilo is reading to Stitch from The Ugly Duckling, the story about an outsider who finds where he belongs, and as she is reading, you see Stitch actually listening, actually processing, actually connecting with the idea that maybe he does not have to be what he was made to be. Mia's delivery during the scene is so gentle and earnest, and the CGI on Stitch's face conveys this shift from the confusion to understanding. It's beautiful. But then things starts to fall apart. Cobra Bubbles come back with bad news. Despite Nanny's efforts, things are not improving enough. There's a deadline now. Nanny has to prove she can provide a stable environment for Lilu, or social services will remove Lilu from the home. This scene is gut wrenching. Sydney plays Nanny's desperation with such a raw emotion. She is begging for more time, promising to do better, and you can see that she genuinely doesn't know how. The sequences where everything goes wrong, where Stitch's choice directly leads to consequences that threaten the family, is structured similarly to the original but hits harder because of how grounded this variant is. In the animated film, Stitch's destructiveness was exaggerated and cartoonish. In this variant, when Stitch causes a scene and it gets back to Cobra, you understand exactly how real the threat is. This is not just plot mechanics. This is a child about to be ripped away from her sister and put into a foster care. Stitch overhears Nani saying something about how maybe things would be easier if Stitch was not there, and he runs away. This movement works because it's complex. Nanny is wrong to say it, but you understand her frustration. Lilo is heartbroken, and you feel that too. Stitch is hurt and confused because he was just starting to believe he could belong somewhere. Everyone is suffering and it's nobody's fault and everyone's fault all at once. The scene where Lilu goes looking for Stitch, calling for him in the rain, is devastating. Mia plays it with this desperation that breaks your heart. She's crying, she's scared, and she does not understand why everyone she loves keeps leaving her. First her parents, now Stitch. The rain in the scene is both literal and metaphorical. Everything is washing away. By the act of two, everything has collapsed. Cobra has made his decision. Lilu is going to be removed from Nanny's custody. Stitch has run away. Nanny has lost. And then Jumba makes his move, trying to capture Stitch, which leads directly into the climax. What works about this second act is how it builds tension gradually while deepening character relationships. What doesn't quite work is that some of the comedic elements feel at odds with the heavier emotional tone. There are still attempts at broad humor. Plackley doing something silly, Stitch causing a slapstick cheers, but it doesn't always mesh well with the serious drama happening around. The original animated film balanced that tonal shift perfectly because animation can get away with more tonal flexibility. In live action, the whiplash between cute alien comedy and child custody drama is occasionally jarring. Here we go. This is where the movie makes its biggest deviation from the original and where opinion on this remake splits most dramatically. In the original Lilu and Stitch, the climax involved Captain Gantu showing up, capturing both Lilu and Stitch, and Nanny, Jumba, and Plackley all teaming up to rescue them. It was this beautiful culmination of everyone who started as enemies becoming family and working together. In this version, without Gantu, the climax has to be restricted entirely. Jumba is the antagonist, and he is trying to capture Stitch, not to save him, but to use him as a weapon. Jumba attacks. There's big action sequence, and it's well choreographed and exciting, but it doesn't have the same emotional resonance. Here's what happens. Jumba corners Stitch. There's fight. Buildings get damaged. People are in danger. Stitch has to choose between his destructive programming and his love for Lilu. And in this moment, Stitch chooses Lilu. He protects her instead of destroying everything. That choice is what defines him. The Grand Council woman shows up with the Galactic Federation forces and she is ready to take Stitch away to protect Earth from him. But then Lilu steps forward and makes her case. She shows the Grand Council woman the adoption certificate. Stitch is legally her pet. her family member, and according to Earth law, you can't just take someone's family away without cause. The Grand Council woman, being bound by bureaucratic protocol, has to accept this. She can't take Stitch if he's been legally adopted. Now, this is where the ending shifts in a really significant way from the original. In the animated film, once the Grand Councilwoman agreed Stitch could stay, Jumba and Pluckley also decided to stay on Earth and become part of the family. The final shot of the original movie is this big group of photo of everyone together. Lilu, Nanny, David, Stitch, Jumba, Pluckley. It's perfect. It's a complete ʻOhana. In this 2025 version, Jumba doesn't get that redemption. He gets arrested for his crimes and taken away. Pluckley kind of fades into the background. The ʻOhana is just Lilu, Nanny, Stitch, and David. That's a much smaller family and it fundamentally changes the message. There is also a subplot resolution here about Nanny's future. Throughout the film, we have learned that Nanny wanted to study marine biology at UC San Diego, but she gave up that dream to take care of Lilu. In that final act, there's this beautiful moment where Lilu actually encourages Nanny to pursue her dreams. She tells Nanny that she doesn't have to sacrifice everything for her, that ʻOhana means supporting each other's happiness. The ending montage shows life settling into a new normal. Lilu and Stitch are together, causing manageable amounts of chores. Nanny is working toward her own goals while still being present for Lilu. The community rallies around them. Cobra Bubbles approve the family station and Lilu gets to stay home. And then we get to the mid-credit scene, which is actually really sweet. Nanny is now attending UC San Diego to study marine biology, and she uses Jumba's portal gun technology to visit Lilu and Stitch back in Kauai. She pops Tharo this portal, they hug, and it's this nice way of showing that you can pursue your own life while still maintaining your connections to family. It's a very 2025 message about work-life balance and not losing yourself in caretaking. Now, is this ending satisfying? That depends on what you wanted from this movie. If you wanted a beat for beat remake of the original that reinforces all the same themes in the same way, then no, this ending is disappointing. The lack of Jumba's redemption, the smaller ʻOhana, and the different message about what family means, these are significant changes that some people hate. But if you accept this as a reinterpretation that's trying to speak to 2025 audiences with different concerns and different family structures, then the ending works. It's saying that family doesn't have to look one specific way. It's saying that taking care of yourself is not selfish. It's saying that technology can help us maintain connections even across distances. These are the themes that resonate with modern audiences dealing with work-life balance, with living far from family, with trying to pursue dreams while maintaining relationships. Personally, I am conflicted. I miss the bigger ʻOhana of the original. I miss Jumba's redemption because that was such a beautiful part of the original's message. But I also appreciate what this version is trying to do with Nanny's arc, showing that she doesn't have to completely sacrifice her future to be a good sister. That's important. That's something the original didn't really address. The final thematic statement this movie makes is more nuanced than the original. It's not just nobody gets left behind or forgotten. It's nobody gets left behind, but also everyone deserves to grow and pursue their own happiness. That's a more complex message, and whether you think it's better or worse than original depends entirely on your perspective. From a purely technical standpoint, the climax is well executed, the action is exciting, the emotional beats land, and the resolution feels earned, but emotionally, it doesn't quite reach the heights of the original ending because the original had more characters to bring together, more redemption arcs to pay off, and a clear thematic thorough line. Alright, let's dig into what this movie is really about because there's a lot more going on beneath the surface than just a cute alien causing chores. The primary theme of both the original Lilo and Stitch and this 2025 variant is ʻOhana, family, and what that word really means. But how each variant explores that theme is fascinatingly different. In the original animated film, the theme was pretty straightforward. Family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten. It was about creating chosen family, about how the most broken, unwanted beings can find belonging with each other. Stitch was designed to destroy, but through Lilo's love and acceptance, he learned to be better. Jumba and Pluckley were antagonists, but they found their place in this weird little family unit. Even Cobra Bubbles, stern and intimidating as he was, ultimately revealed himself as someone who cared and wanted this family to succeed. This 2025 version explores ʻOhana through a more complicated lens. Yes, it's still about family and belonging, but it's also about the weight of family obligation and the question of whether taking care of yourself counts as abandoning your ʻOhana. Nana's arc is all about this tension. She loves Lilu desperately, but raising her sister is literally destroying Nanny's own future. Is it selfish for Nanny to want to go to college, to have her own dreams? The original film never really asked that question. This one restless with it. The film also explores how grief shapes and wraps family dynamics. In the original, Lilu and Nanny's parents were dead, but it was somewhat abstract. This variant makes the grief much more present and real. You see how Lilu's trauma responses manifest as behavioral problems. You see how Nanny's grief has turned into this desperate need to prove she can hold things together. You can see how both sisters are dealing with loss in different ways and how that creates friction between them, even though they love each other. Another layer to the ʻOhana theme in this variant is about community as family. The film puts more emphasis on the Hawaiian community around Lilu and Nanny, showing how neighbors and friends try to help even when they don't fully understand the situation. This reflects a more authentic portrayal of Hawaiian culture, where community and extended ʻOhana are fundamental to identity. Here's where I think the theme is handled well. The movie doesn't present easy answers. It doesn't say family is all that matters. Sacrifice everything else. It says family matters, but so does your own well being, and finding balance is hard. That's real, honest, adult message wrapped in a movie about a cute alien. Where it gets tricky is that by cutting Jumba's redemption arc, the movie undermines its own message about nobody getting left behind. Jumba literally gets left behind. He gets arrested and taken away. You can argue that he doesn't deserve redemption because he remained a villain, but that's the point. In the original, even someone who doesn't deserve it can find redemption, thorough love, and acceptance. That's powerful. This variant doesn't deliver that same message. The real world relevance of these themes in 2025 is huge. We are really living in a time where young people are increasingly pressured to be caretakers for family members, where economic pressures make it nearly impossible to pursue your dreams while supporting loved ones, where mental health and trauma are finally being discussed openly. This film speaks to those contemporary concerns in ways the original could not, because those conversations were not happening the same way in 2002. Does the film handle this theme well overall? Mostly yes. It explores it with more depth and nuance than most Disney movies attempt, but it also creates thematic contradictions that weakens the impact. You can't say nobody gets left behind and then leave Jumba behind. You can't emphasize found family and then keep the family small and exclusive. Now let's talk about the social and cultural issues this movie addresses, because there's a lot to unpack here. The 2002 original Lilo and Stitch was already surprisingly progressive for its time in how it portrayed Hawaiian culture and family structures. But this 225 variant goes even further in its culture representation and social commentary. First and foremost, this movie is deeply concerned with authentic Hawaiian representation. They shot on location in Hawaii. They cast native Hawaiian actors in the lead roles. They incorporated real Hawaiian music, including a new original song called Hile Papahi, No Lilo Stitch, performed by Markili Ho Amalo and the Kamehameha School's Children's Chorus. The screenwriter Chris Kikanio Kalani Bright is Hawaiian. His mother Lionel K. Bright is the director of that children's chorus and also appeared in the film's music. This is not performative diversity. This is actually centering Hawaiian voices in a story about Hawaiian characters. The movie also doesn't shy away from the economic realities of living in Hawaii. Nanny working multiple jobs but still struggling to make ends meet. That's real. The cost of living in Hawaii is astronomical, and local families, especially young people trying to build lives there, face enormous financial pressure. The film shows this without being preachy about it. You see Nani's exhaustion, you see the bills piling up, you see how one unexpected expense could derail everything. There's also subtle but important commentary about the foster care system and child protective service. Cobra Bubbles is portrayed sympathetically, but the system he represents is shown as both necessary and deeply flawed. Yes, there are cases where children need to be removed from unsafe homes, but there are also cases like Lilu and Nani's where a loving family is being threatened with separation because they can't meet bureaucratic standards of stability. The movie doesn't offer easy solutions, but it's acknowledged the complexity. The grief and trauma representation in this film is also significant. Lilo's behavior is clearly trauma response, but the adults around her don't always recognize it as such. They see a problem child instead of a grieving child. This reflects real problems in how schools and systems often pathologize traumatized children instead of providing appropriate support. The film doesn't explicitly spell this out, but if you know anything about childhood trauma, you can see it clearly. One aspect that's somewhat controversial is how the film toned down some of the original social commentary. In the 2002 variant, there was sharpness style about government overreach, about how authorities often make problems worse when trying to help, about how bureaucracy values paperwork over people. This variant is gentle in its criticism. Cobra is more sympathetic. The system is portrayed as well meaning if imperfect. Some viewers felt like this was Disney playing it safe, not wanting to offend anyone by being too critical of social services or government agencies. The movie also explored theme of nature versus nurture through Stitch's character. He was created to be a weapon programmed to destroy it. Is he responsible for his destructive behavior if he was literally designed that way? Or can love and environment overcome programming? This is obviously an allegory for debates about criminal justice, about rehabilitation versus punishment, about whether people can truly change. The film comes down firmly on the side of redemption and change, which is important. Another interesting bit of social commentary is about tourism and culture preservation. Lilu taking photos of tourists is funny, but it's also this small commentary on how tourists consume Hawaiian culture without understanding it. The film shows authentic Hawaiian practice like hola and the traditional music alongside the commercialized stories version of Hawaii, creating an implicit contrast between cultural authenticity and culture commodification. The handing of disability and difference is another layer. Stitch is an ally, obviously, but this inability to control his destructive impulses read as neurodivergence to many viewers. Lilu's social struggles and unusual behaviors also suggest neurodivergence. The film's message that these characters deserve love and belonging despite being weird or difficult resonates strongly with disabled and neurodivergent audience. Is the social commentary heavy-handed? No, thankfully. It's woven into the story naturally. You can watch this as just a fun adventure about a girl and her aligned pet, or you can engage with the deeper layer about economic inequality, systematic failures, culture preservation, and trauma. That's good storytelling. Let me point out some of the symbolic elements and visual metaphors in this film that you might have missed, because there's actually quite a bit of depth hidden in the details. Let's start with Pudge the fish. On the surface, Lilo feeding Pudge peanut butter sandwich because Pudge controls the weather is just a quirky character trait, but symbolically it represents Lilo's desperate attempt to control an uncontrollable world. Her parents died, and in her child's mind, if she can just keep Pudge happy, maybe she can prevent more tragedy. It's about the illusion of control that traumatized people create to feel safe. The camera and Lilu's photography habit is another symbolic element. She is constantly photographing tourists, trying to capture happy families and perfect moments. This represents her desire to document and preserve what she doesn't have. She is an observer of happiness rather than a participant in it, at least until Stitch arrives. Stitch being blue is interesting from a color symbolism perspective. Blue often represents sadness and isolation in visual storytelling, but it's also associated with loyalty and trust. Stitch literally embodies both. He is isolated and sad because nobody wants him, but he becomes the most loyal, trustworthy friend Lilo could ask for. The constant rain and water imagery in this film is significant. Water represents both life and danger in Hawaiian culture, and the movie uses it that way. Lilu and Nani's parents reportedly died in a car accident during a rainstorm, so rain is this threatening presence. But water is also essential to Hawaiian life, to surfing, to the ocean that surround the island. The film navigates this dual symbolism throughout. The surfing scene with Nanny and David are not just romantic moments. Surfing represents freedom and escape, a brief respite from the crushing responsibility Nanny carries. When she is on the water, she is not Lilo Guardian or a struggling young adult. She just herself. Elvis Presley as Lilo's obsession is multi-layer symbolism. Elvis represents a very specific America, but he was also someone who appropriated from various cultures, including Hawaiian culture, and became this commercial icon. Lilu's love of Elvis show how even in Hawaii, mainland American culture has permeated and influenced local life. It's a subtle commentary on cultural imperialism wrapped in fun musical movements. The adoption paperwork and legal documents that become so important at the climax symbolize how modern society has bureaucratized something as fundamental as family. Love and connection should be enough to make someone family, but in reality you need paperwork and legal recognition. The film both criticizes showing how bureaucracy threatens to tear apart a loving family and work within it, using that same bureaucracy to protect Stitch's place in the family. The destruction Stitch causes can be read as a metaphor for how trauma and pain manifest destructively. Stitch cannot help being destructive at first because it's his nature. Just like traumatized children cannot always control their behavioral problems, learning to channel that energy into something positive, learning to build instead of destroy, that's the healing process. The ugly duckling story that Lilu reads to Stitch is obvious symbolism, but it's work. Both Lilu and Stitch are the ugly ducklings, that one who don't fit in, who everyone thinks are wrong or broken. The promise of that story is that they are eventually find where they belong and realize
They were not ugly duckling at all. They were always swans. They just needed the right pond. Visual motifs throughout the film include broken things being repaired or repurposed. Lilu's toys are mostly handmade or broken. The house is old and needs work. Even Stitch's car stitched because he looks stitched together. This motif represents how the characters themselves are broken but can be mended with love and care. The portal technology that appears in the mid-credits scene is symbolic of how we maintain connections across distance in a modern world. It's literally impossible for Nani to be in two places at once to pursue her education in California while also being present for Lilu in Hawaii. The portal in sci-fi wish fulfillment, but it represents video calls, flight home for holidays. All the way we try to bridge gaps when families geographically scattered. What makes Lilo Stitch work in both the original and this remake is its emotional authenticity. At its heart, this is a story about broken people finding each other and healing together. Let's analyze what emotion these films evoke and why certain scenes hit so hard. The most powerful emotion this film traffics in his loneliness. Both Lilu and Stitch are profoundly lonely. Lilu has Nani, but Nani is overwhelmed and emotionally unavailable because of stress. The other kids don't like Lilu. She feels completely alone in the world. Stitch was created in a lab, literally programmed to be alone, to destroy rather than connect. When these two lonely beings find each other, it's devastatingly beautiful because you understand how much they each needed exactly this. The films also deal heavily in fear and anxiety. Nani's fear of losing Lilu permeates every scene she is in. Sydney Elizabeth Agudong played this fear with such visceral reality that you can feel your own chest tightening watching her. Lilu's fear of abandonment derives so much of her behavior. Stitch's fear of being captured and destroyed motivates his actions. The entire movie is steeped in this ambient anxiety that feels very real. But what saved the film from being overwhelming dark is joy. The moment of genuine happiness and fun are so necessary and so earned. When Lilu and Stitch are surfing together and when they are dancing to Elvis, when they are just being weird together, those moments of joy feel like air after being underwater. The film understands that trauma survivors need moment of lightness to survive. There is also a thread of shame running through the film. Nani is ashamed that she is failing as a guardian. Lilu is ashamed that she is a bad and can't seem to be the good kid everyone wants her to be. Stitch is ashamed of his destructive nature. The emotional journey of the film involves moving from shame to acceptance, from self-loathing to self-love. Why do certain scenes emotionally devastate us? The scene where Lilu is looking for Stitch in the rain works because it externalizes her internal state. She is crying, the sky is crying, everything is falling apart. When she can't find Stitch, it confirms her worst fear that everyone leave eventually. Maya's performance in this scene is so raw that you are crying with her. The "this is my family" speech works because it's about claiming belonging in a world that constantly tells you you don't fit. Lilu is declaring that this weird aligned creature is family and nobody can tell her otherwise. For anyone who's ever felt like an outsider, that declaration is powerful. The moments when Nani breaks down hit hard because we have all felt overwhelmed and inadequate. When she's sitting in her car crying, when she's this to make Stitch feel aligned yet comprehensible. They nailed it. Stitch sound exactly like he should. The environmental sound design is also strong. The ocean sound, the rain, the wind, the ambient noise of Hawaiian life, all of that creates sonic texture that immerses you in the setting. When you are in a scene on the beach, you hear the waves and the seabirds. When you are in the Lilo's house, you hear the creaks and settling sound of an old building. It's the kind of sound design that you don't necessarily notice consciously, but you did miss it if it was not there. The mixing of dialogue, music, and effect is mostly well balanced. You can always hear what characters are saying, which is crucial. But there are few moments where the music gets a bit loud and competes with dialogue. This is a common problem in modern blockbuster, but it's still frustrating when you miss a line because the score swelled at the wrong moment. One sound design choice I really appreciated is the use of silence. There are moments where the film goes quiet, letting emotional beats breathe without music or effects. These moments are powerful because they create contrast with the louder, more chaotic sequence. The quiet moment where Lilu is photographing Stitch sleeping, for instance, has this gentle ambient sound but no score, and it feels intimate and real. The action sequences are where the sound design really kicks into higher gear. When Stitch is causing distraction, the sound effects are appropriately chaotic and impactful. When buildings are damaged or vehicles crash, it sounds heavy and dangerous. This is important for making the stress feel real. Overall, the music and sound package is strong but not exceptional. The incorporation of authentic Hawaiian music is the biggest win. The Elvis covers work well. The original score is forgettable but functional. The sound design is professional and immersive. It's not going to win awards, but it served the movie well and enhanced the viewing experience. The screenplay for this film was written by Chris Kalani, bright, and that's important to note because Chris is a native Hawaiian writer. Having a Hawaiian voice crafting the story makes a real difference in authenticity. Let's analyze the screenplay's strength and weakness. First, the dialogue. At its best, the dialogue in this film feel natural and unforced. The conversation between Lilu and Nanny sound like real sister talking with all shorthand and emotional baggage that implies Maya and Sydney are not reciting lines, they are inhabiting characters who have history with each other. There's good writing creating a foundation for good performance. The humor in the screenplay is hit or miss. Some jokes land really well, particularly the physical comedy with Stitch and the awkward interaction between Hawaiian locals and the line invaders, but some jokes feel forced, like the script is trying too hard to be funny. Please comedic moments especially feel like they are aiming for laugh and don't always come. One of the screenplay's biggest strengths is how it deepened the sister relationship. In the original film, Nani and Lilo's dynamic was important but somewhat surface level. This screenplay gives them real conflict, real resentment alongside the love, real complexity. The scene where they argue about Stitch and Nani say maybe things would be easier without him. That messy and painful and real. The screenplay is not afraid to show that love does not always feel good, that family can be hard even when everyone means well. The pacing of the screenplay is mostly solid. At 108 minutes for the film compared to the original's 85 minutes, you don't think it might drag, but the additional time is mostly used to develop character relationships, not pad the runtime with filler. There are few sequences that could have been tightened, particularly in the second act, but nothing egregious. Now let's talk about the plot holes and the logical issues because there are some. The biggest one is how easily the red councilwoman accept the adoption certificate as a reason Stitch can stay on Earth. In a society advanced enough for intergalactic government, they don't have protocol for retrieving dangerous weapons that have been accidentally adopted by primitive aliens. Is the same plot hole from the original film, and this variant does not really address it any better. Another logical issue is Jumba's motivation shift. In the original, Jumba created Stitch out of scientific curiosity and maybe a bit of ego, but he was not actively malevolent. In this variant, Jumba's motivations for wanting Stitch back are somewhat murky. Is he trying to prove his experiment works? Is he trying to weaponize Stitch for someone? The screenplay never fully clarifies this, which makes his villainy feel less motivated than it should. The structure of the screenplay follows the original pretty closely for the first two acts, then diverges significantly in the third act with Gantu's absence and the Jumba's villain turn. This structural choice is controversial as we have discussed. From a pure storytelling perspective, removing Gantu and making Jumba the final antagonist create a less dynamic climax. The original structure, where multiple character arcs converge in the rescue mission, was more satisfying dramatically. Character arcs are where the screenplay really succeeds. Lilo's journey from closed off and hurting to open and loving is clearly charted. Nani's journey from trying to be perfect to accepting help and pursuing her own dream is well developed. Even Stitch's arc, learning to be more than his programming, comes through clearly. These are not just characters moving through plot, they are changing because of events. The thematic writing, ideas about family and belonging into the story is mostly subtle and effective. The screenplay tells the audience to pick up on themes without constantly spelling them out. The "this is my family" speech is explicit thematically, but it's earned because the whole movie has been building to that statement. One weakness is how supporting characters are sometimes underwritten. David is nice but does not have much personality. Cobra Bubbles is sympathetic but one dimensional. Plickle exists mostly for comedy relief without much depth. The screenplay focused so heavily on Lilo, Nanny, and Stitch that everyone else got shortchanged somewhat. The climax writing is where things get shakiest. The action beats are fine, but the emotional resolution feels rushed. The Grand Councilwoman agrees to let Stitch stay. Jumba gets arrested, and suddenly everything is okay. The original took more time with the emotional resolution, showing the family coming together. This variant wrapped things up more quickly, presumably to get the mid-credit scene about Nani going to college. The mid-credit scene itself is nice but feels disconnected from the main story. It's an epilogue showing where everyone ended up, but it's not quite integrated into the narrative. It feels added rather than organic. Dialogue wise, there are some really beautiful lines when Lilu tells Stitch ʻOhana means family, and family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten. Maia delivers it with such sincerity that the line transcends being a Disney catchphrase and becomes genuinely moving. But there are also some clunky expositional lines, particularly when Jumba or Plickle are explaining plot mechanics. Overall, the screenplay is good but flawed. It successfully updates the story for modern audience, add depth to key relationships, and maintain the emotional core of the original. But it also creates new problems with the structural change, leaves some plots point undercooked, and does not always stick the landing on humor or action. Okay, let's talk about the business side of this thing, because the box office performance of Lilo Stitch 2025 is generally shocking. Nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, predicted this movie would become the cultural and commercial phenomenon it did. The film opened on May 2025 Memorial Day weekend. Going into that weekend, industry tracking suggested it would open somewhere in the $50 to $60 million range domestically. That's solid for a live action Disney remake, but nothing exceptional. The previous live action remake, Snow White, had been a massive flop, losing Disney an estimated $100 million, so expectations were casually optimistic but guarded. An opening weekend happened. Lilo Stitch opened to $78 million domestically over the 3-day weekend and $102 million over the 4-day Memorial Day weekend. That absolutely blew past projections. But what was even more impressive was the international performance. The film opened simultaneously in most major international markets and pulled in another $145 million overseas. The worldwide opening weekend total was $247 million. That massive for a film that was not expected to be a blockbuster. Week 2 is where things got really interesting. The film only dropped 32% in its second weekend, which is phenomenal haul for a blockbuster. Usually big opening movie drove 50 to 60% in week 2 as everyone who was excited rushes out opening weekend and then interest wanes. But Lilo Stitch had incredible word of mouth. People were telling their friends to see it. Families were going back for second viewing. The legs on this movie were strong. By the end of its theatrical run, which is still ongoing as I record this but which has already hit most of its total, Lilo Stitch has made approximately $438 million domestically and $600 million internationally for a worldwide total of $1.038 billion. $1 billion is the first film of 2025 to cross $1 billion. Is the highest grossing Disney live action remake since 2019's The Lion King, which made $1.66 billion. What makes this particularly impressive is the production budget. While Disney has not officially disclosed the budget, industry estimates put it around $150 to $175 million. That's actually relatively modest for a big VFX heavy tentpole. For comparison, some of the other recent Disney remakes cost significantly more. This film had a reasonable budget and made it back 7 times over. That's a hit by anyone's standards. Why did it perform so well? Multiple factors. First, the Memorial Day weekend release date was smart. It gave families a long weekend to see it, and early positive word of mouth had time to spread before the Monday reviews came out. Second, the cast and culture authenticity resonated. Native Hawaiian audience were excited to see themselves represented authentically, and then enthusiasm spread. Third, nostalgia is powerful. The people who love the original 2022 film are now adults with disposable income and kids of their own. They wanted to share Lilo Stitch with the new generation. Fourth, the marketing was excellent. Disney's promotional campaign focused on the genuine emotion of the story while also showcasing Stitch's cuteness. They released clips that went viral, including the scene of Lilo reading The Ugly Duckling to Stitch. They got I.M. Tonging to perform Hawaiian roller coaster ride live on American Idol right before release, which was massive exposure. The campaign found the right balance between this is a fun family movie and this will make you cry. Fifth, and this is crucial, there was not a lot of major competition. The summer 2025 movie slate was relatively light on family films. Lilo Stitch had the market to itself for several weeks, allowing it to build an audience without being cannibalized by other releases. The international breakdown is interesting. The film performed exceptionally well in Japan, where Stitch is a massive pop culture icon. It made over $150 million just in Japan. It also did strong business in Europe, Australia, and Latin America. The only market where it underperformed slightly was China, where it made about $45 million. That's not bad, but Disney was hoping for more given the Chinese market's importance. Comparing this box office to expectations, we are talking about a film that overperformed by about 100%. If you had told about Disney executive in January that the Lilo Stitch remake would make $1 billion, they would have thought you were insane. They were hoping to make their money back, get decent numbers, and maybe justify a sequel. What they got was a culture phenomenon and one of the biggest hits of 2025. This performance has huge implications for Disney's strategy going forward. It's proof that family audience will show up for quality content with authentic culture representation. It showed that not every Disney remake need to be authentic culture representation. It showed that not every desperately trying to explain to Cobra that she's doing her best Those moments tap into universal experience of trying and failing and trying again anyway. What makes these films emotional, core, effective in its specificity is not dealing with generic emotions. It's showing very specific manifestation of grief, trauma, loneliness, and love. The more specific it gets, the more universal it becomes because specificity is what makes emotions feel real. The cathartic elements of the film come when common characters are finally seen and accepted as they are. When Lilu accepts Stitch despite his destructiveness, when any family accepts help from others instead of trying to do everything alone. When Stitch chooses to protect rather than destroy, those moments of acceptance and change provide emotional release after all attention and fear. Comparing these to other films emotionally, Lilo Stitch operates on a similar wavelength as something like E.T., where the central relationship between a child and otherworldly being carries the emotional weight. But where E.T. is about loss and letting go, Lilo Stitch is about choosing to stay and build something permanent. Does the film succeed emotionally? Absolutely. This is one of those movies where you see adults crying in the theater because it's hitting emotional thoughts that resonate regardless of age. The original did this, and this remake maintained that emotional power while adding new layers through its more grounded performances. Dean Fleischer Camp, coming from Marshall, the shelf which shoes on to this massive Disney production, is a fascinating direction journey, and you can absolutely see his fingerprints all over this film. Let me break down what make his direction work and where he faced challenges. Fleischer Camp's vision for this movie was clear from the beginning. In interviews, he described his pitch to Disney as jokes plus cheers. He wanted to make something funny and adventurous but with genuine emotional depth. That's exactly what Marcel the Shell was a stop motion film about a teeny shell that made you laugh and then absolutely destroyed you emotionally. Disney saw that and said, yes, that's what we need for Lilo Stitch. What Fleischer Camp brings to this movie is a real sensitivity to emotional truth. He's not interested in manufactured sentiment or manipulative tearjerker moments. He wants genuine emotion that's come from character and situation. You can see this in how he directs the actors, especially Maia Kealoha. He's not asking her to act sad or act purely. He's creating an environment where she can be a real kid with real emotions and then capturing that authenticity. One of his signature directional choices is the use of handheld camera work in emotional scene. When Nani and Lilu are arguing, when things are chaotic, the camera moves with them, creating this scene of instability and urgency. But in quiet moments like when Lilu is reading to Stitch, the camera is still and patient. This visual language enhances the emotional content without being obvious about it. Fleischer Camp also make really smart choices about when to use wide shots versus close-ups. The wide shots of the Hawaiian landscape ground the story in place and beauty, reminding us that this is happening in paradise even though the characters are going through hell. The close-ups on faces, especially during emotional beats, force us to see and feel what the characters are experiencing. He is using the full vocabulary of cinema to tell this story. Where he absolutely nailed it is in blending live action and CGI characters. Coming from Marcel, he understood that an animated characters in live action worlds need to feel physically present. He used an incredibly detailed puppet on set for actor to interact with, which meant Maya was building a real relationship with something tangible. Then the CGI team enhanced that rather than creating it from scratch. You can feel the difference. Stitch feel like he actually there in the room with the actors. But there are some directional choices that don't quite work. The action sequence, particularly the climax with Jumba, sometimes feel like Fleischer Camp is outside his comfort zone. He is better with quiet emotional moments than big blockbuster action. The fight scenes are competent but not spectacular. They lack the kinetic energy that a more action-oriented director might have brought. There are also sometimes a tonal inconsistency that feel directional. The movie can't quite decide if it's grounded family drama or a wacky aligned comedy, and it's ping pong between those modes sometimes abruptly. A more experienced blockbuster director might have found a smoother tonal blend. Comparing these to his work on Marcel, you can see growth and challenges. Marcel was a small, intimate film where he had complete creative control. Lilo Stitch is a massive Disney production with stakeholder management and franchise implications. The fact that he maintained any artistic vision at all is impressive, but you can also feel where he had to compromise. The best directional choice he made was prioritizing the sister relationship. He knew that if audience did not believe in and care about Lilu and Nanny, nothing else would matter. So he spent time on that, letting scene breathe, trusting his actor to carry the emotion. That's what makes the movie work. His work with child actors deserves special mention. Maia Kealoha's performance is so natural and unforced, which is rare with kids this young. That's directional skill, creating an environment where a child feels safe to be vulnerable and authentic. He talks in interviews about how he never wanted Maya to feel like she was performing, he wanted her to just be. One more thing Fleischer Camp brings is a clear respect for Hawaiian culture. He defers to his Hawaiian screenwriter and actors. He doesn't impose a mainland perspective on the story. That humility as a director, knowing when to get out of the way and let culture authenticity lead, is important and often overlooked. Thus, cinematography in this film, handled by a team including director of photography Mauro Fiore, who won an Oscar for Avatar, is honestly one of the strongest technical aspects. Let's talk about how they use visual language to tell this story. First of all, shooting on location in Hawaii instead of on a soundstage or using green screen was crucial. The landscapes are real, the light is real, the ocean is real. That authenticity translates to screen. When you see Nani and David surfing, they are actually in the Hawaiian Ocean with real waves and real sunlight. The golden hour shots on the beach, the lush greenery, the vivid blue of the Pacific, all of that ground the fantastical element of the story in real beauty. The color palette is interesting. Unlike the original animated film, which used a very specific watercolor as aesthetic with gentle pastels, this film used richer, more saturated colors. The blue are deeper, the green are more vibrant, the sunset are more dramatic. This feels like a deliberate choice to differentiate from the animated version while still capturing the beauty of the island. Lighting is used really effectively to convey emotional states. The bright sunny scene when things are going well create this warm, hopeful atmosphere, but when conflict hits, when Nani and Lilu are fighting, or when things are falling apart, the lighting becomes harsher or dimmer. There is a scene where Nani is sitting in her car alone and the lighting on her face is so specific, highlighting the exhaustion and defeat. That's careful cinematographic work. Camera movements serve the story. During action sequence with Stitch causing chores, the camera is kinetic and mobile, following the destruction with energy. During quiet emotional beats, the camera is still observing. This creates visual rhythm that mirrors the emotional rhythm of the story. One standout shot is when Lilo and Stitch are silhouetted against the ocean at sunset. It is this perfect composition that feels like it could be a painting. The film has several of these moments where the beauty of Hawaii is showcased in almost documentary fashion. It's a love letter to the island as much as it's a story about characters. The framing of characters tells you a lot about their emotional states. When Lilo is isolated and lonely early in the film, she often framed alone in shots with a lot of empty space around her. As she bonds with Stitch, they are framed together, the empty space disappearing. When the family is together at the end, the framing is warm and close. It's a visual storytelling 101 but executed well. The underwater sequences are beautifully shot. Water is such an important element in Hawaiian culture and in this story, and the cinematography captures both its beauty and its power. The scene where Lilo and Stitch are underwater together has this magical quality, the light filtering through the surface, their silhouettes moving together. It's gorgeous. If I am being critical, some of the CGI integration does not always mesh perfectly with the live action photography. There are moments where Stitch or other CGI elements feel slightly separate from the environment, like they are lit slightly differently than the real elements. This is a common problem with live action CGI hybrid, but it does occasionally pull you out of the moment. The night scene and low light photography are hit or miss. Some of them are atmospherically lit and beautiful, others feel a bit murky, like they were trying to hide the CGI imperfections by keeping things dark. This is especially noticeable in the climatic fight sequence at night. Overall, though the cinematography elevates this movie significantly, it's not groundbreaking or revolutionary, but it's solid professional work that serves the story and showcases the location beautifully. The film looks expensive and polished in a way that honors the setting and the character. The music and sound design in this film is a really interesting mix of honoring the original while creating something new. Let's break down what works and what doesn't. First, the Elvis Presley music. This was non-negotiable. Elvis is so fundamental to the original Lilo Stitch's identity that cutting it would have been scheduled. This variant keeps classic like Hound Dog, Heartbreak Hotel, and You Are the Devil in Disguise. But they are also added a new cover of Burning Love produced by Bruno Mars and performed by his nephews Ninja Music and Zia Rhythm. That cover is fantastic. It updates the Elvis sound for 225 while maintaining the retro feel. Bruno Mars, being of Puerto Rican and Filipino descent and having grown up in Hawaii, brings authentic Iceland flavor to the production. Hawaiian Roller Coaster Ride is the iconic song from the original that everyone remembers. This variant features a new recording by American Idol Season 21 winner I Am Tongi and the Kamehameha School's Children's Chorus. It's a beautiful Aima's voice has this soulful quality that captures the aloha spirit, and the children's chorus add layer of harmony that make it feel both nostalgic and fresh. The original sound Hile Papahi No Lilu Ami Stitch performed by Mal Kili Hoa Malu and the Kamehameha School's children's chorus is a standout. It's sung in Hawaiian. It incorporates traditional Hawaiian musical style, and it feels like it honors the culture in a way that the original 2002 film, as much as we love it, did not quite achieve. This is authentic Hawaiian music, not Hollywood's interpretation of what Hawaiian music should sound like. Aloha O, the traditional Hawaiian farewell song, is performed as duet by Sydney Elizabeth Agudong and the Maia Kealoha as their character Nanny and Lilo. This moment in the film is absolutely beautiful. It's this tender scene of the sisters connecting to music, and you can hear the genuine affection in their voices. It's one of the most touching musical moments in the entire film. The original score composed for this film is serviceable but not particularly memorable. It does its job of supporting the emotional beats and building tension during action sequence, but there are not any standout themes that stick with you after the movie ends. Compare this to the original animated film score by Alan Silvestri, which had these memorable motifs, and this variant feel less distinctive musically. Sound design is really important in a movie like this, where you have an aligned character who makes weird noises. His sound, his gibberish language, his growls and chips, all of that had to be carefully designed. Chris Sander is providing the voice, but the sound team is layering and enhancing those vocals.